The big meeting room of the Galactic Council was quiet. Too quiet. Ambassador Zixthera looked at the empty seats where humans used to sit. Her long blue fingers shook a little as she spoke to the other alien leaders. "They are gone," she said. "All of them. The humans have left." 3 months ago, the Council had made a big decision. They voted to keep humans out of the Andromeda trade deal. It was worth billions of credits. Many Council members thought humans were too new, too different, too dangerous to trust with such important business. The vote was close, but humans lost. Everyone expected them to get angry. Everyone expected them to fight or make threats or demand another vote. Instead, something strange happened. Captain Jake Morrison was the last human to speak in the council chambers. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He stood up slowly and said, "We understand your choice. Humanity will respect what the council has decided. We will leave all our treaty deals as you have asked." That was it. No shouting, no angry words, no promises of revenge. The next day, humans started packing. They closed their offices. They called back their spaceships. They said goodbye to alien friends and business partners. They finished all their work contracts and paid all their bills. Then they left. At first, the council members felt good about their choice. The humans were gone, and everything seemed fine. The galaxy kept spinning, trade ships kept flying, people kept working and living their lives. But now, 3 months later, things were starting to break. The first problem was the mines. Human companies had been digging up rare metals from asteroids all over the galaxy. These metals were needed to build computers, spaceships, and energy systems. The human mining ships were still out there, but they worked by themselves now. No human workers watched them or fixed them when things went wrong. Dr. Lisa Chen had been in charge of the biggest human research station. It floated in space near Centauri Prime, studying alien diseases and making new medicines. Before she left, she sent all her research data to the local alien doctors. Her last message was short. "The medical bay will work for 3 more days. After that, you are on your own." The alien doctors thought this was easy. They had the data. They had the machines. How hard could it be to run a medical station? Very hard, it turned out. On the factory world of Kepler 442b, the same thing happened. Ben Turner had been the human manager of the biggest manufacturing plant. He left behind all the machines working perfectly. He gave the alien workers all the instruction books and computer programs they needed. But when the first machine broke down, the alien workers found out something scary. The instruction books told them what to do, but they did not tell them why. The humans had built these machines in a special way that only humans seemed to understand. The quantum communication networks were failing too. These were the systems that let people talk to each other across the galaxy instantly. Humans had built most of these networks. Captain Alex Rodriguez had been the chief engineer who kept them running. Before he left, Rodriguez gave the alien technicians thick books full of instructions. He showed them how to fix common problems. He even left behind smart computer programs to help them. But the networks kept breaking anyway. The alien technicians would fix one problem and 2 more would appear. It was like the networks were alive and fighting back. Ambassador Thelnara of the Crystalline Hegemony was worried. Her people were made of living crystal and were very smart with technology. But even they could not understand how humans had made the networks work so well. "We thought it was simple quantum science," she told the other council members. "But every time we try to fix something, we make it worse." The same problems were happening everywhere. Human farmers had been growing food on 17 different worlds. They had left behind detailed guides about planting and harvesting. But the crops were getting sick and the alien farmers did not know why. Human engineers had built power plants that kept whole cities running. The plants were still working, but they made strange noises now. The alien workers were scared to touch anything because they did not understand how the systems really worked. The Council's military leaders were worried too. Humans had helped build the galaxy's defense systems. Their spaceships and weapons worked together with alien technology to protect everyone from space pirates and hostile aliens from other galaxies. Admiral Kevtar looked at his status reports and felt sick. The defense grid was falling apart. Human sensors could not talk to alien weapons. Alien command ships could not understand human warning systems. The galaxy's protection was breaking down piece by piece. But the strangest thing was that no one could find the humans. Scout ships had gone to all their old colonies and found empty cities. The buildings were clean and the power was still on, but no humans were there. It was like they had just walked out of the galaxy and disappeared. Some council members started to get scared. What if the humans came back angry? What if they wanted revenge? What if they had been planning this all along? But others were starting to realize something else. Maybe the humans had not been the problem. Maybe they had been the solution. Maybe the galaxy needed humans more than anyone had understood. The first cracks were showing and they were getting bigger every day. 6 months had passed since the humans left. The Galactic Council met again, but this time it was an emergency meeting. The problems were getting worse, much worse. Ambassador Thelnara was the first to speak. Her crystal body was dim and flickering, which meant she was very worried. "The communication networks are dying," she said. "We cannot fix them. Every time we try, more systems fail." The quantum networks connected thousands of worlds across the galaxy. People used them to talk to family on other planets. Businesses used them to make deals. Governments used them to coordinate their actions. Without these networks, the galaxy would become a collection of isolated worlds. Captain Alex Rodriguez had built these networks for the humans. Before leaving, he had given the aliens thick instruction manuals. Everything looked simple on paper. Connect this wire to that port. Set this frequency to that number. Run this program when problems occur. But the networks were not simple at all. They were like living things that needed constant care and attention. Rodriguez had spent years learning to feel when something was wrong, even before the computers detected problems. He could hear strange sounds in the quantum static that meant trouble was coming. The alien technicians were smart, but they could not hear what Rodriguez heard. They could not feel what he felt. The networks kept breaking in new ways that the instruction books did not cover. On the mining world of Procyon III, things were even worse. Maria Santos had been the human supervisor of the atmospheric processors. These machines made the air safe for aliens to breathe on worlds that naturally had poisonous atmospheres. Santos had left behind perfect instruction manuals. She had trained the alien workers for weeks before leaving. She had even recorded video messages explaining how to handle common problems. But when the main processor started making weird noises, the Zephyrian workers panicked. The instruction manual said things like, "Adjust the harmonic resonance until it feels right," and listen to the processor's heartbeat rhythm. What did that mean? How could a machine have a heartbeat? How could you adjust something until it felt right? The Zephyrian workers were logical beings. They needed exact numbers and precise instructions. They could not understand human intuition. The processor kept getting worse. The air on Procyon III was becoming dangerous to breathe. Millions of alien colonists might have to leave their homes. The military problems were even scarier. Admiral Kevter of the militant coalition stood before the council with bad news. The galaxy's defense systems were falling apart. "We cannot protect ourselves," he said. "Our ships cannot talk to each other. Our weapons cannot work together. The humans were the glue that held our defenses together." Commander Rick Barnes had been the human military coordinator. His job was to make different alien technologies work as one big system. Vorthon sensors were very good at detecting enemy ships. Hegemony weapons were very powerful. Coalition command systems were fast and efficient, but these systems had been made by different species who thought in completely different ways. The Vorthons used color patterns to share information. The hegemony used mathematical equations. The coalition used emotional concepts. Barnes had learned all these different ways of thinking. He could translate Vorthon color warnings into hegemony math equations. He could turn coalition battle emotions into specific tactical orders. He made 3 different species fight like one big army. Now Barnes was gone, and the 3 groups could barely understand each other. When Vorthon sensors detected enemy pirates, they sent color pattern warnings. But the hegemony weapons needed mathematical targeting data, and the coalition ships needed emotional motivation commands. By the time everyone figured out what was happening, the pirates had already attacked and escaped. The food crisis was getting worse too. Danny Brooks had been a human agricultural specialist on the frontier worlds. He had created amazing farms that grew food for millions of aliens. His crops were bigger and healthier than anything aliens had grown before. Brooks had left detailed farming guides. Plant these seeds at this time. Water them this much. Harvest when they look like this. Everything seemed simple, but the crops were dying anyway. The soil was becoming poisonous. Strange insects were eating the plants. Diseases were spreading that Brooks had never mentioned in his guides. The alien farmers realized that Brooks had not just been following instructions. He had been constantly watching, adjusting, and solving problems before they became serious. He understood the complex relationship between plants, soil, insects, weather, and dozens of other factors that affected growing food. Dr. Nicole White had been studying these relationships for decades. She had created a delicate balance between human crops and alien soil creatures. This balance was like a complex dance where every partner had to move at exactly the right time. Without White to conduct this dance, everything was falling apart. The soil creatures were dying, which killed the plants, which poisoned the soil, which killed more creatures. 17 worlds were facing starvation. The technology failures were spreading everywhere. Engineer Pete Collins had designed the fusion reactors that powered the core worlds. These reactors provided energy for billions of aliens living on the most important planets in the galaxy. Collins had built his reactors with what other aliens called human intuition. He could sense when a reactor was starting to operate outside safe parameters, even when all the instruments said everything was normal. He could feel vibrations and hear sounds that meant trouble was coming hours or days before it happened. The alien technicians were good at following procedures, but they could not sense what Collins had sensed. Several reactors had already had dangerous failures. Power was becoming unreliable on some of the most important worlds in the galaxy. Captain Sam Rodriguez had coordinated all interstellar traffic through the quantum highway system. This system let spaceships travel faster than light between star systems. It was like a massive network of cosmic roads. Rodriguez had not just directed traffic. He had been constantly adjusting the system to account for solar flares, gravitational changes, and the chaotic interactions between hundreds of different alien faster-than-light technologies. The automated systems could handle normal traffic, but they could not handle the constant small crises that Rodriguez had solved every day. Ships were getting lost. Some had crashed. Others had arrived at the wrong destinations. The galaxy's transportation network was becoming dangerous and unreliable. Dr. Amy Johnson had been studying a plague affecting the Outer Rim colonies. She had almost defeated the disease with treatments that seemed to work like magic. The alien doctors had her research notes, but they could not make her treatments work. Johnson had understood disease in ways that could not be written down in medical books. She had seen patterns that alien doctors missed. She had made intuitive leaps that saved lives but could not be explained with logic. Without Johnson, the plague was spreading again. Colonies that had been healthy were getting sick. The disease was moving faster than before, and no one knew how to stop it. The council members looked at each other with growing fear. They were starting to understand a terrible truth. Humans had not been just participants in galactic civilization. They had been its hidden foundation. While other species had focused on perfecting their own strengths, humans had learned to bridge the gaps between incompatible ways of thinking. The galaxy was discovering that it could not function without humans, and the humans were nowhere to be found. 9 months after the humans left, the galaxy was in chaos. What had started as small problems had grown into disasters that threatened entire star systems. The Galactic Council met in emergency session as reports of failures poured in from every corner of known space. Counselor Vexahara of the Silicon Collectives presented the most frightening evidence. Her mechanical voice was unusually emotional as she spoke. "We have discovered the truth," she said. "Humans were not just members of our civilization. They were its nervous system. They were the connections that made everything work together. The food crisis had become a catastrophe. Dr. Nicole White's agricultural programs had been feeding 17 star systems, but her work was far more complex than anyone had realized. She had not just grown crops. She had created living ecosystems that balanced thousands of different life forms. On the farming world of New Kansas, the wheat fields were turning black with disease. The alien farmers had followed White's planting instructions perfectly, but they had missed something important. White had been constantly adjusting the balance between helpful soil bacteria and harmful fungi. She had been watching for tiny changes in plant color that warned of nutrient deficiencies. She had been listening to the sound of healthy soil versus sick soil. Without her constant attention, the delicate balance was collapsing. Helpful bacteria were dying, which let harmful organisms take over. Plants that had grown strong and healthy for years were now weak and sickly. The alien farmers watched helplessly as their crops failed, and their people faced starvation. The same pattern was repeating on farming worlds across the galaxy. Human agricultural specialists had created complex webs of life that seemed simple on the surface but required constant intuitive adjustments to maintain. The instruction manuals could not capture the subtle art of reading natural systems and knowing when to intervene. The technological failures were getting worse too. Engineer Pete Collins had designed fusion reactors that powered the core worlds, but his designs had relied on what alien engineers dismissively called human gut feelings. Collins could sense when reactors were drifting toward dangerous conditions long before instruments detected problems. On Vorthan Prime, the main power reactor started making unusual sounds. The alien technicians checked all their instruments. Everything looked normal, but the sounds got stranger and some workers reported feeling nervous around the reactor for reasons they could not explain. 3 days later, the reactor had a critical failure that shut down power to half the planet. Billions of aliens lost electricity, heating, and life support systems. Emergency teams discovered that Collins had built sensors into his reactors that measured things alien science did not even recognize as important. The quantum highway system was becoming a death trap. Captain Sam Rodriguez had been more than a traffic controller. He had been constantly making thousands of small adjustments to account for cosmic weather, gravitational anomalies, and the unpredictable interactions between different faster-than-light technologies. Space traffic moved through invisible roads made of bent space and quantum energy. These roads were constantly shifting and changing, like trying to drive on a highway made of water. Rodriguez had developed an intuitive understanding of these changes that let him guide ships safely through the chaos. The automated systems could handle routine traffic, but they could not adapt to unexpected situations. Ships started arriving at wrong destinations. Some got lost in quantum storms. Others crashed into each other at coordinates where safe travel lanes had suddenly shifted. The passenger liner Star of Andromeda had been carrying 15,000 alien tourists when it got lost in a quantum maze that formed unexpectedly between two star systems. The ship's crew sent desperate messages asking for help, but no one knew how to guide them home. Rodriguez would have solved the problem in minutes, but Rodriguez was gone. Dr. Amy Johnson's absence was causing a medical disaster. The plague she had been fighting in the Outer Rim colonies was spreading faster than ever. The alien doctors had her research notes and treatment protocols, but they could not make her methods work. Johnson had treated diseases by understanding them as living systems rather than just chemical problems. She had seen patterns in how symptoms developed that revealed what treatments would work for each individual patient. Her healing methods combined science with intuition in ways that could not be reduced to simple formulas. On the colony world of Haven's Rest, Dr. Zechtel tried desperately to follow Johnson's plague treatment protocols. The human doctor's notes said to adjust the medicine dosage based on patient energy levels and disease rhythm patterns. What did that mean? How could you measure energy levels or rhythm patterns? Dr. Zechtel was a skilled physician, but his species treated disease with logical analysis and precise chemical formulations. The idea that healing required intuitive understanding of invisible patterns was completely foreign to his way of thinking. Fires. Plague continued to spread. Colonies that had been healthy for months were suddenly reporting new cases. The disease seemed to be evolving, becoming stronger and more resistant to standard treatments. Without Johnson's intuitive approach to healing, the aliens were losing the war against the plague. The diplomatic situation was becoming dangerous too. Humans had served as mediators in dozens of ongoing disputes between alien species. They had not been chosen as mediators because they were weak or unimportant. They had been chosen because they possessed a unique ability to understand and translate between completely different ways of thinking. The crystalline hegemony and the militant coalition had been arguing about mining rights in the Vega system for decades. Human diplomat Carl Davis had been slowly negotiating a compromise that both sides could accept. His approach had been patient and creative, finding solutions that neither side had thought of themselves. Without Davis to mediate, the argument was escalating quickly. The hegemony thought in terms of mathematical fairness and logical resource distribution. The coalition thought in terms of honor and warrior pride. Neither side could understand what motivated the other side, and their anger was growing. Similar conflicts were erupting all over the galaxy. Ancient grudges that human diplomats had kept under control were flaring into open hostility. Species that had cooperated for decades were suddenly seeing each other as enemies. The most terrifying discovery came from the crystal hegemony's attempts to understand human technology. Their best scientists had spent months trying to reverse engineer the quantum communication networks. Every attempt had ended in disaster. The technology was not just beyond their understanding. It seemed designed to resist their efforts to comprehend it. 3 research stations had been destroyed, and hundreds of scientists had died in explosions caused by their attempts to modify human-built systems. Their technology thinks, reported Dr. Silthyra, the hegemony's chief scientist. It adapts and responds to our efforts to change it. We cannot understand it because it was never meant to be understood by minds like ours. Financial systems across the galaxy were collapsing as traders realized that human economic advisors had been quietly preventing market crashes and economic bubbles. Human economists understood how different species made financial decisions and how these decisions interacted in complex ways that could create dangerous instabilities. Without human oversight, speculation was running wild. Artificial shortages were being created by species who hoarded resources they did not understand. Economic chaos was spreading as rapidly as the technological failures. The council members sat in stunned silence as report after report confirmed the same terrible truth. Humans had been far more than participants in galactic civilization. They had been its invisible foundation, the glue that held together technologies, species, and systems that were fundamentally incompatible with each other. While other species had developed specialized strengths, humans had developed the ability to understand and bridge differences. They had learned to think like other species while retaining their own unique perspective on problem-solving. The galaxy was discovering that civilization itself was more fragile than anyone had imagined. Without humans to maintain the delicate balance between incompatible systems and incompatible minds, everything was falling apart, and the humans were still nowhere to be found. The galaxy stood on the brink of total collapse, and the species that could save it had vanished without a trace. 18 months after humanity disappeared, their answer came not through the desperate beacon signals or the frantic search fleets, but through every working communication network in the galaxy simultaneously. The message was simple, but it changed everything. We received your messages. We are coming home. The human fleet that emerged from the dark space beyond the galactic rim was unlike anything they had possessed before. Their ship still looked recognizably human, with the clean lines and practical designs that had always marked their technology, but these vessels incorporated advances that seemed decades ahead of what humans had achieved during their time in the galaxy. The lead ship was massive, larger than any human vessel ever seen before. Its hull shimmered with energy patterns that alien sensors could not identify. When it moved, space itself seemed to bend around it in ways that made watching aliens feel dizzy and confused. Admiral Sarah Mitchell commanded the human fleet from the bridge of the ship they called New Horizon. She was a woman who had not existed, 18 months ago, trained and promoted during humanity's exile. Her message to the assembled Galactic Council was broadcast across every functional network in known space. "We did not leave because we were angry with you," she said. Her voice was calm and confident. "We left because we realized that our presence was preventing you from growing into what you needed to become. We hoped that 18 months would be enough time for you to develop your own solutions." The council members who heard her words felt a mixture of relief, shame, and fear. Relief because humanity had returned to save them. Shame because they had needed saving at all. Fear because these humans seemed far more powerful than the ones who had left. Ambassador Carl Davis was humanity's new diplomatic representative. He had learned his trade during the 18 months of exile, studying the mistakes and successes of human diplomacy in the galaxy. His first message to the council was both understanding and firm. "We know that you acted according to your own understanding of what was best for the galaxy," he said. "We do not blame you for the choice you made, but we also will not pretend that nothing has changed. We have changed, and so have you." The truth emerged slowly through negotiations that were unlike any diplomatic talks in galactic history. During their 18 months in exile, humans had not been hiding or sulking in defeat. They had built a thriving civilization in the dark spaces between galaxies, free from the need to constantly adapt their ideas to work with incompatible alien technologies. Dr. Rachel Green, now humanity's chief scientist, presented discoveries that amazed and worried the council in equal measure. "We discovered that our greatest weakness was also our greatest strength," she explained. "Our need to find common ground and build bridges between different ways of thinking. But we were limiting ourselves by always compromising our innovations to make them work with your existing systems. Free from the need to make everything compatible with alien technology, human science had made leaps that would have been impossible while they remained in the galaxy. They had developed new forms of faster-than-light travel that did not depend on the chaotic quantum highway system. They had created energy sources that were more efficient and more stable than fusion reactors. They had built communication networks that operated on principles completely unknown to alien science. But the most significant advancement was in understanding. Engineer Lisa Parker unveiled humanity's greatest achievement: artificial intelligence systems that could learn to think like other species while retaining human problem-solving abilities. "We call them bridge AIs," Parker explained. "They can serve as permanent translators between incompatible technologies and ways of thinking. They reduce the galaxy's dependence on human mediators while preserving the benefits of human integration skills." The bridge AIs were more than just smart computers. They were artificial minds that could truly understand the logical patterns of crystalline hegemony thought, the emotional frameworks of coalition military doctrine, and the color pattern communications of Vorthon culture. But they could also think like humans when creative solutions were needed. The humans' return came with conditions that reflected their new understanding of their role in galactic civilization. They would help stabilize the failing systems and restore the collapsed networks, but they would do so as equals, not as the invisible support structure they had been before. They would share their new technologies, but only with species willing to develop the mental flexibility to truly understand them. They would serve as mediators and system integrators, but they would also maintain their own independent territories and their own advanced civilization beyond the galactic rim. The negotiation process revealed how much both humanity and the galaxy had changed. The humans who returned were more confident, more advanced, and more aware of their own value. The aliens who welcomed them back were humbler, more grateful, and more willing to acknowledge the complexity of the cooperation they had taken for granted. The reconstruction began immediately. Human engineers worked alongside bridge AIs to repair the quantum communication networks, but the new systems were designed differently. Instead of requiring constant human intuition to function, they incorporated AI partners that could provide the creative flexibility that alien logic could not supply. The fusion reactors were rebuilt with new safety systems that could predict problems before they occurred. The atmospheric processors were upgraded with biological monitoring systems that could maintain ecosystem balance, without requiring human specialists to sense invisible changes in environmental health. Dr. Amy Johnson returned to fight the plague that had been spreading unchecked during humanity's absence. But she brought with her new medical AIs that could learn to recognize the subtle patterns she saw in disease progression. The alien doctors could work with these AIs to provide treatments that combined logical analysis with intuitive understanding. The agricultural systems were restored with the help of farming AIs that understood the complex relationships between plants, soil, weather, and ecosystem balance. Alien farmers could learn to work with these AI partners to maintain the delicate biological webs that human specialists had created. The military integration was perhaps the most challenging reconstruction project. Human coordinators returned to help rebuild the galaxy's defense systems, but the new networks included AI translators that could help different species understand each other's military doctrines and coordinate their actions even when humans were not present. The diplomatic situation required the most delicate handling. Human mediators returned to help resolve the conflicts that had erupted during their absence, but they also established new protocols that would prevent similar breakdowns. In the future, bridge AIs were trained to understand the cultural and psychological factors that led to misunderstandings between species. As the galaxy stabilized, a new form of civilization emerged. It was built on mutual recognition of each species' unique contributions rather than the assumption that one approach to thinking and problem-solving was superior to all others. The humans had proven that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is showing them what they lose when you are not there. The crisis had transformed both humanity and the galactic community. The humans had evolved from a species that everyone took for granted into one that commanded genuine respect and recognition. The other species had learned that cooperation required constant work, and that their differences were sources of strength rather than problems to be overcome. The new galactic civilization was more stable and more equitable than the old one. It was built on interdependence rather than exploitation, on recognition of the value of different perspectives rather than the dominance of any single way of thinking. The humans had departed quietly when they felt their contributions were not valued. They returned as architects of a better future for all species in the galaxy. They had shown that true strength lay not in dominance or independence, but in the ability to help others become their best selves while growing stronger in the process. The galaxy had learned that civilization itself was a delicate balance of incompatible elements held together by those who understood how to bridge differences. The humans had provided that understanding, and they had returned to ensure that it would never be lost again. 12 months had passed since humanity disappeared. The Galactic Council faced a choice that would have been impossible to imagine just 1 year earlier. They could watch their civilization collapse completely, or they could do something that went against everything they believed about their own superiority. They could admit they were wrong and beg humanity to return. The Vorthan Empire was the first to break. Emperor Thaxvar had been the loudest voice calling for human exclusion from the Andromeda Trade Consortium. He had argued that humans were too primitive and dangerous to be trusted with such important business deals. Now his empire was dying. The fusion reactors that powered his core worlds were failing one by one. Each failure left billions of Vorthans without power, heat, or life support. His military fleets could not coordinate their actions. His communication networks were barely functional. Emperor Thaxvar sat alone in his throne room, looking at reports that told the same story over and over again. Every human-built or human-designed system was failing, and his best scientists could not fix them. The proud Vorthan Empire was helpless without the species they had dismissed as inferior. "Build the beacons," he told his military commanders. "Send them beyond the galactic rim. Find the humans." The beacons were massive, faster-than-light transmitters designed to reach farther into space than any signal had ever traveled before. They would broadcast the same message continuously. "We're wrong. We need your help. Please come back." It was the most humiliating message the Emperor had ever authorized, but pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. Other species quickly followed the Vorthan example. The crystalline hegemony built their own beacons. The militant coalition redirected their most powerful warships to search the empty regions beyond known space. The Silicon collectives offered vast rewards to anyone who could find even one human. But the galaxy was learning that humanity had vanished more completely than anyone had thought possible. Scout ships sent to their last known colonies found something that chilled every alien who saw it. The human cities were empty but perfectly preserved. Buildings stood clean and intact. Power systems still functioned. Automated gardens still grew food and flowers. But there were no humans anywhere. On the human colony world of New Earth, Scout Captain Veltora walked through empty streets that looked like their inhabitants had simply stepped out for a moment. Coffee shops had cups still sitting on tables. Libraries had books left open as if someone had been reading and planned to return. Children's toys were scattered in parks where no children played. It is like they just walked out of the galaxy and closed the door behind them, Veltora reported. Everything they built still works, but they are gone. The most disturbing discovery was that human-built systems were beginning to shut themselves down. The mining robots in the asteroid fields stopped working and sent themselves to safe parking orbits. The atmospheric processors on terraformed worlds activated shutdown sequences that would preserve the environments but end their own operations. The message was clear. These systems had been designed with built-in limits. They would function for a specific amount of time without human oversight, and then they would safely deactivate themselves. The humans had always intended their absence to be temporary, but they had also planned for the possibility that they might not return. Dr. Kevin Martinez's biological research stations were shutting down one by one. Martinez had been humanity's chief expert on alien biology, and his work had been crucial for maintaining stable ecosystems on hundreds of terraformed worlds. As his monitoring systems went offline, entire biospheres began collapsing. The careful balance of introduced species that had created livable environments was breaking down without constant human adjustment. Worlds that had supported millions of colonists were becoming uninhabitable. On the water world of Aquatica, the algae farms that produced oxygen for the atmosphere were dying in massive blooms of toxic bacteria. The human-designed balance between oxygen-producing plants and waste-consuming organisms was falling apart without Martinez's intuitive understanding of biological systems. The crystal hegemony's desperate attempts to understand human technology had become even more dangerous. Their scientists had discovered that human quantum communication devices contained some kind of adaptive intelligence that actively resisted alien attempts to modify or repair them. Dr. Silthyra had been the hegemony's most brilliant scientist. Before she tried to reverse engineer a human communication relay, the device had somehow detected her attempts to analyze it and had responded with a quantum feedback pulse that damaged her crystalline matrix permanently. Their machines are not just tools, she warned other scientists. They are partners. They were designed to work with human minds in ways we cannot understand. When we try to force them to work with our minds, they resist. 5 research stations had been destroyed by similar incidents. The technology was not just beyond alien understanding. It seemed designed to protect itself from alien interference. Financial markets across the galaxy were in complete chaos. The economic models that human advisors had used to prevent crashes and bubbles were proving impossible to replicate. Human economists had understood something about the psychology of different species that alien economists could not grasp. On the trading world of Commerce Station, alien financiers watched helplessly as their markets swung wildly between boom and crash cycles. Species that had never had economic problems were suddenly facing bankruptcy and resource shortages. The Ferengi-like Profit Coalition had been experts at making money for centuries, but they had always focused on short-term gains. Human economic advisors had taught them to think about long-term stability and the complex ways that different species' financial behaviors affected each other. Without human guidance, the Profit Coalition's trading strategies were creating artificial scarcities that led to real shortages. Their success was destroying the economic foundation that made their success possible. The military situation was becoming desperate. Without human coordinators, the galaxy's defense forces could barely function as separate units, let alone as a unified system. Ancient enemies were beginning to test the borders, sensing weakness in the chaotic responses to their probes. The Destroyer Hive, a hostile alien race from beyond the galactic rim, had been quiet for decades because they feared the galaxy's coordinated defenses. but their scout ships were appearing more frequently in border systems, testing response times and looking for weaknesses. Admiral Kevtar knew that the galaxy could not defend itself against a serious destroyer attack. The weapon systems built by different species could not work together without human integration protocols. Command structures designed by different military traditions could not coordinate their actions without human translators who understood multiple approaches to warfare. The most frightening reports came from diplomatic fronts. Wars were breaking out between species that had been allies for generations. Ancient conflicts that human mediators had kept dormant were erupting into open violence. The resource wars between the mining guilds and the agricultural combines had been settled by human diplomat Janet Stevens 20 years earlier. Stevens had found a creative solution that let both groups prosper by specializing in different types of resource extraction. Without Stevens to maintain the delicate agreements she had negotiated, old resentments were resurging. Mining operations were expanding into agricultural areas. Farming colonies were claiming mineral-rich territories. Both sides were preparing for war over resources that had been shared peacefully for decades. Similar conflicts were erupting everywhere. The galaxy was rediscovering that cooperation between different species required constant work by individuals who could understand multiple ways of thinking. The Council's most desperate measure was the construction of the Deep Space Search Array, a network of the most powerful sensors ever built. The array was designed to scan the empty regions beyond the galactic rim, looking for any trace of human activity. But space is vast, and the regions beyond the galaxy are infinite. The humans could be anywhere, or they might have traveled so far that no signal could reach them. The galaxy's most advanced technology seemed primitive when faced with the immensity of the universe. As the search continued with no results, a terrible possibility began to occur to the council members. What if the humans did not want to be found? What if they had left not just in disappointment but in disgust? What if they had decided that the galaxy was not worth saving? The beacons continued broadcasting their desperate messages into the void. The search fleets pushed farther into unexplored space. The galaxy held its breath and waited for an answer that might never come. But in the deep places between the stars, something was listening. Something was deciding whether a civilization that had driven away its best hope for survival deserved a second chance. The humans had not gone far. They had been watching, waiting, and growing stronger. Soon, they would decide whether to return to a galaxy that had rejected them, or to let that galaxy face the consequences of its own choices.